when a black farmer's animals are slaughtered by a racist gang in rural America. His silence and patience shatter as his son is brutally beaten, exposing the sheriff's betrayal and the system's cruelty. Just as despair threatens to consume them, his brother Marcus, a legendary Marine, returns, bringing discipline and fire, turning the family farm into a line of defiance. What follows is an escalation of violence, a midnight clash where cowards are unmasked. The sheriff's power collapses under the weight of truth, and in a final storm of testimony and exposure, justice takes poetic form as oppressors are stripped of their thrones and a family long hunted rises unbroken, their land reclaimed not just as soil, but as a monument to resilience. Elijah Turner rose before dawn, as he always did. The air was cool, damp with the smell of earth, the silence broken only by the shuffle of his boots across the porch. The land stretched before him, 40 acres of soil his family had held onto with stubborn, unyielding hands. His grandfather used to say the land was more than property. It was memory, blood, and survival. Inside the barn, cows stirred, pigs snorted, and hens clucked impatiently for feed. Elijah moved among them with a quiet rhythm, a man who carried his past in every gesture. His son Isaiah followed reluctantly, still half asleep, dragging a feed bucket. "Son," Elijah said without looking up, "animals eat before we do, always." Isaiah grunted. "Feels like they eat more than we got." Elijah smirked faintly. "That's the cost of keeping life. You give, it gives back." Silence lingered, broken only by the scrape of hay. Beyond the fences, headlights flickered on the county road. A truck slowed, its engine growling. Elijah froze, his hand on the feed scooped out. The truck crawled past, white faces behind the windshield. A voice yelled through the dark, "Nice spread, Turner. Shame if something happened to it." Laughter followed, cruel and shocked. Then the truck sped off, kicking gravel. Isaiah's eyes widened. "They've been watching us." Elijah exhaled slowly. "They've always been watching. Don't give them more than a look. But quiet, son. Feed the hogs." Isaiah obeyed, but his jaw was tight. Later that morning, Elijah stopped by the hardware store in town. Conversations dipped when he entered. Old men leaned on counters, hats tipped low, eyes heavy with meanings unsaid. He bought nails, fencing wire, and left without lingering. On Main Street, a small group of men leaned against a truck, the same faces from earlier. One spat on the ground as Elijah passed. "You think you're something special, Turner," the man drawled. "Owning land your kind was never meant to keep." Elijah kept walking. Words, he knew, could weigh heavier than fists, but silence was a shield. Back on the farm, Isaiah couldn't hold it in. "Why don't you ever say nothing back? They call you names, they spit, they laugh." Elijah fixed him with a look. "Because if I answer wrong, boy, I don't just lose my temper. I lose this land. I lose you." Isaiah stared, confusion battling with anger. That evening, Elijah sat on the porch, watching the sun burn low. The fields glowed gold, animals grazing peacefully. The land was his shield, his inheritance, his defiance. But in the shadows beyond the fence, headlights flared again. Engines rumbled, voices rose, the laughter carried across the field. Elijah didn't move. He just whispered, more to himself than to Isaiah, who stood beside him. "They think fear will break me, but fear is the only thing they've ever owned." The chapter closed on the sound of engines fading, and the land holding its silence like a secret. The night carried a silence too sharp to trust. Elijah Turner lay awake in his bed, listening. Isaiah snored lightly in the next room. Outside, the cattle lowed nervously, a restless tremor running through the barnyard. Elijah sat up, boots sliding on quietly. He knew that sound. Animals didn't stir without reason. He grabbed the old shotgun from the wall, not loaded. Just a relic of his father's days, but still a symbol. He stepped into the night air, the cool bite of autumn clinging to his skin. The barn door was ajar. Elijah moved closer, his breath caught. Inside, 2 goats lay slaughtered, their throats cut clean. On the stall wall, scrawled in red paint, were the words, "Get out, Turner." A sharp whistle rang from the dark. Tires squealed. A truck peeled away, its laughter echoing in the distance. Elijah didn't chase. He just stood there, fists trembling, the shotgun useless in his hands. Isaiah appeared, rubbing his eyes. "Pa, what happened?" Elijah blocked the view with his body. "Go back inside, son." But Isaiah shoved past him, froze, then let out a strangled gasp. "They killed M. They just killed M like nothing." Elijah grabbed his shoulder firmly. "Don't look too long. Don't give them what they want." Isaiah's voice cracked. You can't just let this slide. Call the sheriff. Elijah exhaled slowly. I will. The next morning, Elijah stood in the county sheriff's office. Sheriff Dalton leaned back in his chair, boots crossed on the desk, chewing on a toothpick. His badge glinted, but his eyes carried no weight of justice. They killed my livestock, Elijah said evenly, left threats on my barn. I want a report filed. Dalton smirked. Sounds like animal trouble. Coyotes, maybe. Coyotes don't write. Elijah's voice sharpened. Dalton chuckled. Could be kids, fooling around. You know how teenagers get. These weren't kids. These men been circling my farm for weeks. You know who they are. The sheriff leaned forward, toothpick pointing like an accusation. Careful how you talk in here. You come in blaming folks without proof. I might have to fine you for false claims. Elijah's jaw tightened. So you'll do nothing. Dalton's smile was cold. I'll do my job when there's evidence. Until then, keep better watch on your animals. Elijah stood there, the silence thick. Townsfolk in the waiting area watched, some with pity, most with smirks. He turned without another word, walking out with his dignity intact, but his anger burning. At the diner later that day, whispers floated through the air as Elijah entered. Plates clattered, spoons stirred coffee, but conversations dipped when he passed. A farmer at the counter muttered to his friend, loud enough for Elijah to hear, "Man can't even keep his own animals safe. What's he think he's doing, owning all that land?" Laughter followed. Elijah sat at a booth, Isaiah across from him, eyes full of fire. "Pa, they're laughing at you." "At us?" Elijah stirred his coffee slowly. "Let them laugh. Their laughter says more about them than it ever will about us. But sheriff ain't gonna help. Nobody's gonna help." Isaiah leaned forward, fists clenched. "So what do we do?" Elijah looked at his son, his voice low, steady. "We endure. That's how we've always survived." Isaiah's silence screamed louder than words. That evening, Elijah walked the perimeter of the farm. The fences creaked in the wind, barbed wire catching the last rays of sun. He spotted the spray-painted slur still staining the barn wall. He didn't wash it off. Not yet. He stood before it. Isaiah watching from a distance. "They think this paint makes them powerful," Elijah muttered under his breath. "But it only shows they're too weak to face me in the light." Isaiah shouted from the porch, his voice raw. "Then why don't you face them? Why don't you fight back?" Elijah turned slowly, the weight of generations etched into his face. "Because every fight they pick is a trap. They want me to swing first, so they can say I was the problem. I fight back wrong, son. We don't just lose animals, we lose everything." Isaiah stormed inside. Slamming the door, Elijah remained, staring at the red words on his barn until the night swallowed them. The farm was quiet again, but Elijah knew peace had already left. The first strike had been made, and it would not be the last. Engines roared across the county road just after dusk. Elijah Turner stood on his porch, Isaiah beside him, both watching the dust rise behind a convoy of trucks. Their headlights blazed like a warning. The vehicles slowed as they reached the fence line, circling, their tires crunching gravel. Men leaned out of windows, voices sharp as knives. "Still here, Turner. Thought we told you to pack up. Don't worry, we'll help you move." Gunshots cracked, not aimed at the house but into the air, the sound rattling through the night. Cattle bellowed in panic. Chickens flapped violently in their coop. Isaiah flinched, fists clenched at his sides. "They're gonna drive us out, Pa," he whispered. Elijah didn't move. His silence was a wall. The trucks eventually sped off, laughter echoing in the darkness. Isaiah spat into the dirt. "You call that enduring?" By morning, 3 sheep were gone, the fence cut clean. Elijah found fresh bootprints near the creek. He walked the trail silently, shotgun in hand, but it ended at tire tracks leading back toward town. Isaiah followed, boiling with rage. "They don't even hide it. They want us scared. Why aren't we doing anything?" Elijah stopped. "We are doing something. We're still standing." "That's not enough," Isaiah shouted. "You think keeping your mouth shut makes you strong, but it just makes us targets." Elijah's voice was low, final. "And you think fighting without strategy makes you a man? That's how you lose everything in one night." Isaiah shook his head, storming back toward the house. Sunday morning, church was filled to the brim. Elijah and Isaiah slid into a pew near the back. Pastor Williams began with scripture, but the air was thick, uneasy. Everyone knew about the attacks. Whispers spread like smoke. After the benediction, voices rose. "They gonna burn him out if he stays." An old woman murmured, "They've been burning folks out since my daddy's day." Another replied, You think we should help? Someone asked. A man shook his head quickly. Help him, they'll come for us next. Elijah caught the words, felt the weight of silence surrounding him. He stood as people filed out, his broad shoulders steady, but inside the heaviness grew. Fear was a disease one he saw eating at his neighbors. Isaiah confronted them in the courtyard, voice fierce. Why don't y'all do something? You sit in here praising God but won't stand for what's right. An older man pulled him aside, voice tight. Boy, we've seen what happens when you fight back. They burn your house, your fields, your life. Sometimes surviving means keeping your head down. Isaiah's face twisted. Then what's the point of living if you ain't free? Elijah stepped in, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder. Enough. That evening, as dusk fell, headlights flared again. Trucks idled at the edge of the property. This time, the men didn't shout. They just watched. One fired a shot into the ground near the fence, dirt spraying into the air. Then another tossed a dead chicken onto the grass. Isaiah bolted for the porch steps, but Elijah grabbed his arm. Let go, Isaiah snapped. Not tonight, Elijah said firmly. They're mocking us, right to our faces. Elijah held him until the trucks peeled away into the dark. Isaiah pulled free, tears burning his eyes. You call yourself a man of pride, he said bitterly, but I see a man who lets them take and take. Elijah didn't answer. He looked out over the pasture, animals restless, fences broken, and felt the pressure in his chest. He knew patience had limits. He just didn't know how close his were. At dawn, Elijah walked to the barn. On the door was a new carving, jagged and cruel. Turner equals done. He ran his hand across the splintered wood. His animals stirred behind him, unsettled. Isaiah appeared, bruised with lack of sleep. They won't stop, Pa. You know it. Elijah finally spoke, voice like stone. I know. For the first time, his eyes didn't carry calm, they carried storm. The escalation was no longer whispers, no longer threats. It was war declared in silence and smoke, and Elijah knew the next move would break more than fences. The sheriff's office smelled of stale coffee and tobacco. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering against the cracked linoleum floor. Elijah Turner stood in front of Sheriff Dalton's desk, hat in hand, his face carved with exhaustion. Behind him, Isaiah lingered near the door, arms crossed, fury burning in his young eyes. Dalton leaned back in his chair, chewing a toothpick as if the man before him were nothing but a nuisance. What is it this time, Turner? Elijah's voice was steady, but tight. Half my herd's gone. Fence cut clean. Barn vandalized again. You know who's behind this. I want action. Dalton smirked. Sounds like poor fence work to me. Reckless livestock management. You let animals wander. That's on you. Isaiah stepped forward, fists balled. That's a lie, and you know it. They carved threats into our barn. They shot into our fields. Dalton's eyes narrowed, his tone sharp. Watch yourself, boy. You don't come into my office making accusations. Elijah put a hand out, stopping his son. His gaze never left the sheriff. I've done what's right, reported every incident, brought no violence, and you still turn your back. Dalton spat the toothpick into the trash, leaning forward. Maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe the problem is a man like you, holding on to land that don't belong in your hands. Folks don't take kindly to that. You stir trouble just by staying. The room went silent. The words hung heavy, venom dressed as law. Elijah's jaw tightened. So you admit it. You stand with them. Dalton's voice dropped, low and threatening. Careful how you speak, Turner. You keep pressing this, I'll fine you for neglect. You'll lose that land in a month. Isaiah exploded. You're protecting them. You're supposed to serve the law, not. Dalton slammed his fist on the desk, rattling papers. Enough. One more word and I'll have you both escorted out. Isaiah's face flushed with rage, but Elijah's hand gripped his shoulder, anchoring him. Elijah's voice was cold now, stripped of patience. I see what this is. You wear that badge, but you're just another thief with a desk. The sheriff stood slowly, puffing out his chest. You best walk out that door before you say something you regret. Elijah turned, guiding Isaiah toward the exit. Every eye in the waiting area followed them. Farmers, clerks, townsfolk pretending to read newspapers while smirks tugged their lips. No one spoke. Their silence was a verdict. Outside, the sun glared down on the courthouse steps. Isaiah tore free of his father's grip. You just let him humiliate you. You let him threaten us. Elijah's voice was low, cutting. And if I'd raised my hand, raised my voice, what then? He'd have locked me up, stripped us of the land, left you alone to face them. Isaiah paced, fists trembling. So what? We just take it. Let them run us into the ground. Elijah looked out over the town square, the courthouse looming like a fortress built against him. His silence stretched, heavier than words. Finally, he spoke. No, we endure. But endurance ain't the same as surrender. Isaiah stopped, eyes searching his father's face. Then what do we do? Elijah didn't answer. His expression was unreadable, but inside, something shifted. The silence he carried was no longer patience. It was the storm gathering at the edge of the horizon that evening. Elijah sat on his porch, shotgun across his lap. Isaiah hovered nearby. Restless PA, he whispered. You think God even sees what's happening? Elijah stared at the fading sun, voice quiet but edged with steel. God sees, and so do men. One day, they'll answer. Every last one of them. The wind carried the echo of vengeance in the distance. Elijah's grip on the shotgun tightened, not in fear but in resolve. The betrayal was complete. The law had chosen its side. And Elijah knew the reckoning was no longer a question of if but when. The night smelled of smoke and gasoline before the fire ever started. Isaiah Turner lay awake, listening to the restless shift of animals in the barn. Every creak in the boards, every snap of the wind set his nerves on edge. His father's warnings echoed in his head: patience, restraint, survival. But Isaiah's chest burned with anger, hotter than fear. When the trucks rolled up to the fence line again, laughter spilling into the night, Isaiah was already on his feet. He pulled on his boots, fists clenched, and stormed out the door before Elijah could stop him. Isaiah, his father called, but the boy was already halfway across the yard, running toward the jeering voices. Get off our land, Isaiah shouted, his voice cracking against the engines. The gang of men roared with laughter. One stepped down from a truck, towering, a smirk splitting his face. Look, here Turner's pup found his bark. Isaiah's chest heaved. You touch our animals again, I swear. Before he could finish, the man swung. A fist crashed against Isaiah's jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Boots followed kicks, slamming into his ribs, stomach, shoulders. Teach the boy a lesson. Another voice barked. Isaiah curled arms, shielding his head, pain exploding through his body. He tried not to scream. Elijah's shout cut through the chaos. Enough. He ran forward, but two men raised shotguns into the air, firing a warning blast. Elijah froze, fury shaking his body. You lay another hand on him, and I swear, the gang leader sneered. You swear what? Sheriff says you're reckless. Sheriff says you can't keep your animals safe. Sheriff says this land's wasted on your kind. They kicked Isaiah one last time before climbing back into their trucks. Engines roared, gravel sprayed, and the night swallowed them. Elijah dropped to his knees beside his son, hands trembling as he lifted him gently. Isaiah's lip was split, his ribs bruised, blood seeping into his shirt. Pa, he groaned. I tried. Elijah's voice cracked, anger and grief bleeding together. Hush now, don't speak. Hours later, Isaiah lay on the couch, wrapped in blankets, his body aching with every breath. Elijah sat nearby, head bowed, hands clasped tight. Isaiah broke the silence, voice hoarse. You always tell me to endure, to stay quiet, but what did it get us, Pa? Look at me. Elijah's throat tightened. It kept us alive. Isaiah coughed, shaking his head. Alive don't mean living. You've been carrying chains your whole life. You call it patience. I call it fear. Elijah's eyes snapped up, sharp. You think I'm afraid. You think I swallow my pride because I'm weak. Isaiah's stare burned, even through swollen eyes. If it ain't fear, then what is it? 'Cause all I see is a man letting them take everything. The words pierced deeper than any fist. Elijah stood abruptly, pacing the room, his chest heaving. You don't know what it cost me to keep this land, he said, voice low, trembling with rage. My father fought for it with his blood. My grandfather worked fields he didn't own just to buy it. Every day, men like me were told to move, to bow, to vanish. And still we stayed. Isaiah winced, struggling to sit up. Then, fight for it, Pa. Fight the way they understand. Elijah turned, eyes fierce. And if I do, they'll burn us out by sunrise. They'll put a rope around my neck and call it justice. You think the sheriff will save us? He's already chosen his side. Isaiah's voice cracked, softer now. So we just suffer forever. Elijah's silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. He didn't have an answer that could soothe his son's pain or his own. At church the following Sunday, Whispers filled the pews when Elijah and Isaiah entered. Isaiah walked stiffly, every step a reminder of the beating. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Men avoided their eyes. Pastor Williams prayed for peace, but Isaiah couldn't stand it. After the service, he stood before the congregation, his voice trembling with fury. You see what they did to me. You see what they're doing to us, and you all stay quiet. You pray and you hide while they tear us apart. What good is faith if it don't move you to act? Gasps rippled through the crowd. The pastor tried to hush him, but Isaiah's voice rose. Fear's killing us more than they are. If we don't stand together, we'll die alone. The silence afterward was crushing. Eyes dropped to the floor. No one stepped forward. Elijah pulled his son away, his grip firm, but inside, the words echoed. Isaiah had spoken the truth no one dared admit. That night, Elijah sat alone on the porch. The moonlight cast long shadows across the fields. He replayed his son's words over and over, his chest heavy with guilt and anger. Isaiah came outside quietly, moving slowly with his bruised ribs. He lowered himself into the chair beside his father. I'm sorry I called you a coward, he said softly. Elijah didn't look at him. You were right to be angry. Isaiah's voice wavered. I don't understand your way, Pa, but I don't want to lose this land either. I don't want to lose you. Elijah finally turned, eyes glistening in the pale light. You won't lose me. Not to them, not to fear. The two sat in silence, the weight of their words binding them more than dividing them. But deep inside Elijah, something shifted. The beating of his son was no longer just an attack. It was a line crossed, a debt written in blood, and debts, he knew, demanded reckoning. The news traveled fast. By the time Marcus Turner stepped off the Greyhound bus, the whole town already whispered his name. Some spat it with suspicion, others muttered it with unease, but all knew the story. Elijah's younger brother, a Marine who had seen too many wars and lived to tell it. Marcus carried himself like a man carved from stone, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. His uniform days were behind him, but the discipline clung to every stride. A duffel bag hung at his side, heavy with more than just clothes. Elijah met him at the station, jaw tight. You shouldn't have come. Marcus clasped his brother's hand, grip firm. Couldn't sit by while they beat on my nephew. Elijah's eyes hardened. You think showing up with war stories is gonna fix this? This ain't a battlefield. Marcus smirked faintly. Everything's a battlefield, big brother. Some just don't wear uniforms. Back at the farm, Isaiah lit up when he saw Marcus. Uncle, he rushed forward, despite the bruises still painting his ribs. Marcus pulled him into a careful hug, his face darkening as he felt the boy's frailty. Who did this? Marcus asked quietly. Isaiah glanced at his father. Elijah answered instead, voice heavy. Same men who've been circling for months. Same men the sheriff protects. Marcus set down his bag, scanning the property with a soldier's eye. The fence lines, the barn doors, the open fields. His gaze lingered on the spray-painted slurs still carved into wood. You left their marks up, Marcus observed. Elijah crossed his arms. I wanted them to see I don't flinch. Marcus nodded once. Good. But flinching and fighting ain't the same thing. That night at supper, tension simmered across the table. Marcus tore into red eyes, never leaving his brother. You've been letting them run you down, Eli. They smell weakness, and they'll keep pressing till something breaks. Elijah slammed his fork down. You think I don't know that? You think I ain't carried this family on my back while you were off overseas? I chose to keep us alive, not get us killed. Marcus leaned forward, voice sharp. Alive don't mean free. Isaiah's gaze flicked between them, silent, breathless. Elijah's voice dropped. You come here breathing fire, but you don't understand. These men got the law in their pocket. They want me to swing first so they can bury me under their lies. Marcus's tone softened, but his eyes stayed hard. Then, you don't swing first. You outthink them. You use what they never expect. Discipline. Isaiah finally spoke, his voice trembling with both awe and hope. So what do we do, Uncle? Marcus looked at him, then at Elijah. First, we prepare. You don't fight wolves by running blind in the dark. Word of Marcus's return spread like wildfire. At the diner, whispers grew. That Marine boy's back. Trouble's coming. He's just another Turner. Don't matter what medals he's got. A group of men from the gang sat at the counter, snickering. Bet he thinks he's Rambo. We'll see how tough he is when he ain't got an army behind him. Even townsfolk who pitied Elijah warned him. Don't let your brother stir the hornet's nest. You'll bring more heat down on all of us. Elijah held his silence, but Marcus did not. He stared those men down, unflinching, until their smirks faltered. That evening, Marcus walked the farm like a commander surveying a battlefield. He mapped blind spots, measured distance from the road to the house, reinforced the barn door with spare lumber. He taught Isaiah how to listen for the rhythm of engines in the distance, how to tell when danger was circling. "This isn't war, Marcus," Elijah said from the porch, watching his brother string wire along the fence. Marcus didn't look up. "It's the same thing, Eli. Just different weapons. You defend your ground, or you lose it." Elijah's voice cracked, half grief, half anger. "I've spent my whole life trying not to turn this land into a battlefield, trying not to prove them right." Marcus turned, eyes hard as flint. "And where has that gotten you? Dead animals, a beaten son, and a sheriff who spits in your face. You've been fighting their war, on their terms. That ends now." Later, under the stars, Elijah and Marcus sat on the porch in silence. The night was thick, humming with crickets, but both men carried their own storms. Finally, Elijah spoke. "You came back looking for a fight." Marcus shook his head. "I came back to end one." Elijah studied his brother's face, scarred by battles fought far from home, but his eyes were the same as when they were boys, unyielding, relentless. For the first time, Elijah felt the quiet shift inside him, the patience that had held him for years, cracking beneath the weight of his son's pain. His brother's return, and the truth he could no longer ignore. The farm was no longer just land. It was a line in the sand, and the Turners would not step back. The night was thick with tension. Cicadas droned in the trees, the air hot and restless. Marcus had felt it before, quiet before an ambush. The silence that stretched too long, too heavy. He stood in the barn's shadow, eyes narrowed, listening. The low hum of engines rolled in from the dirt road. One truck, then another, then a third. Headlights cut through the darkness, spilling across the Turners' fields. "Eli," Marcus called low. Elijah emerged from the porch, rifle slung across his chest, though his hands shook. Isaiah peeked from behind him, heart pounding in his ears. "They're here." The trucks skidded to a stop at the fence line, gravel spitting, doors slammed. Laughter carried in the night, rough and sharp. A dozen men stepped out, their boots crunching gravel. Flashlights flickered across the barn. The house, the fields. At the front stood Cole Matthews, his smirk wide, chewing a toothpick like he owned the land. "Evenin', Turner," Cole called. "Heard your war hero bro's back. Thought we'd come give him a welcome party." Marcus stepped forward from the shadows, arms loose at his sides, jaw hard. "You picked the wrong night." The men laughed, gears cutting the air. One shouted, "Look at him, thinks he's still overseas." Marcus's voice was calm, clipped. "You got two choices. Get back in your trucks, or learn what happens when you cross a line you can't uncross." Elijah gripped his rifle tighter. Marcus but Cole barked a laugh, spitting the toothpick. "Ain't no law protecting you out here. Sheriff already said this is just farm business. And I don't see no uniform on you now, Marine. Just another N, with dirt under his nails." The word cut sharp, slicing the night open. Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, closing the distance slow, deliberate. The gang shifted, unease rippling in their line. "You boys spent your lives preying on farmers, kids, and livestock. You think that makes you men." His voice carried low but steady, like steel dragging on stone. "I've seen real men. I've buried better men than you'll ever be. And I'll tell you what I know. Cowards break easy." Cole's grin faltered. "Light it up, boys." Two men raised bats, another a crowbar. One smashed it against the fence post, splintering wood. Another hurled a rock at the barn window, glass shattering. Isaiah flinched. "Stay inside, son," Elijah barked, but Marcus's hand shot up. "Steady. No, he needs to see this. Needs to know we don't bow anymore." The first thug lunged forward, swinging a bat at Marcus's chest. In one swift motion, Marcus sidestepped, grabbed the handle, and yanked the man forward, driving his knee into his gut. The thug collapsed, wheezing. Another charged, crowbar raised. Marcus blocked with his forearm, twisted, and slammed the man's face into the dirt. The sound of bone cracking echoed across the field. Chaos erupted, shouts, curses, heavy boots trampling the soil. From the porch, Elijah raised his rifle and fired into the air. The blast split the night, halting the mob for a heartbeat. "Next shot won't be a warning," Elijah roared, his voice thundering with decades of pent-up fury. Cole sneered. You gonna shoot neighbors, Eli? You ready to hang for it? But Elijah's eyes burned, unshaken. You stopped being neighbors the moment you touched my boy. The gang pressed forward anyway, emboldened by numbers. 3 rushed Marcus at once, fists swinging. He moved like water, blocking, countering, dropping them one by one. His movements were precise, controlled, not brawling, but dismantling. Isaiah watched wide-eyed, his chest swelling. For the first time, he saw what defiance looked like, not words, not silence, but action. One of the gang staggered to his feet, clutching a knife. He lunged for Isaiah, snarling, "Got you now, little," but Marcus was faster. He closed the gap, disarmed the man, and pinned him to the dirt with the knife at his throat. You ever breathe in his direction again, and you won't breathe at all. The man froze, trembling. Cole finally stepped forward, shotgun in hand. The laughter was gone now, replaced by cold fury. "You think you're some kind of savior, Marine," Cole snarled. "This is my county. Sheriff's behind me, judge too. Ain't nobody gonna believe your side." Marcus rose, eyes locked on him. "Maybe. But they'll believe their own eyes when they see your men crawling back beaten. And they'll believe the blood you'll spill when you go too far." Cole raised the shotgun. Elijah swung his rifle toward him, finger trembling on the trigger. "Don't, Eli," Marcus said, voice low, calm. "That's what he wants. He wants us to fire first." The standoff crackled like lightning, men groaning in the dirt, guns aimed, Isaiah clutching the porch rail so hard his knuckles turned white. Finally, red and blue lights flashed faint in the distance. Sirens wailed, growing louder. Cole cursed under his breath. Sheriff Slate to his own damn party. He spat in the dirt, backing toward his truck. "This ain't over. Turner, you and your Marine brother just signed your own death warrants." The gang dragged their wounded and retreated, engines roaring as the trucks peeled off into the night. Silence fell, broken only by the ringing in their ears. Marcus exhaled slowly, shoulders easing. Elijah lowered his rifle with shaking hands. Isaiah rushed down the steps, eyes wide. You fought them all, Uncle you." Marcus crouched, gripping his nephew's shoulders. "Listen to me. Tonight wasn't about winning a fight. It was about showing them we won't fold. But this ain't done. They'll be back." Elijah swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the fading lights. "And next time, the sheriff won't just be late. He'll be leading them." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we make ready, because the real war starts now." The sheriff's cruiser idled at the end of the Turner driveway, lights painting the fields red and blue. Sheriff Dwyer stepped out, adjusting his hat like he had all the time in the world. He looked at the groaning men in the dirt, then at Marcus standing tall, fists still clenched. Well, Dwyer drawled. "Looks like we got ourselves a mess." Elijah's voice cracked like a whip. "You knew this was coming. You sent them here." Dwyer smirked, strolling forward. "Careful with them accusations. Eli ain't wise to bite the hand that signs the reports." Marcus's eyes burned holes through him. "You've hidden behind your badge long enough. Tonight, you stood by while armed men trespassed and attacked." Dwyer's smile didn't waver. "All I see is a violent vet assaulting townsfolk. Self-defense'll be hard to prove with their side of the story." The words hung heavy, but before Elijah could respond, the sound of more engines echoed down the road, not trucks this time, but cars. Headlights swept across the field. A small caravan pulled up, and doors flew open. Out spilled neighbors, townsfolk, and even a couple of journalists with cameras slung across their shoulders. Someone had called them, and they had seen the trucks leaving, men beaten and bloodied, weapons still in their hands. A voice rose from the crowd. "We saw it, Sheriff. We saw who started it." Another joined. "Them boys came looking for blood. If Marcus hadn't been here, Isaiah would be dead." The cameras clicked. Flashbulbs cut the dark. For the first time, the sheriff's smirk faltered. Cole Matthews, still nursing a split lip from Marcus's blows, staggered forward from the shadows near his truck. "They're lying. This was self. A woman's voice cut sharp. Mrs. Jacobs, a schoolteacher, stepped forward. "You brought 12 men with bats and knives to a man's farm in the middle of the night." She turned to the cameras. "This is what we live with, Tara, under the sheriff's protection." Gasps rippled. The journalists leaned closer, pens scratching, lenses focusing. Dwyer's face reddened. "Y'all best clear out before I start making arrests." But Marcus stepped forward, standing between the sheriff and the crowd. His voice was steady, commanding, every syllable carrying the weight of someone who had stared down worse. "You're done, Sheriff. Tonight, You lost your power. These people aren't afraid anymore, and the world's about to see what you've been hiding." Dwyer's hand twitched toward his holster. For a moment, the night teetered on the edge of gunfire. But then, from the crowd, cell phones rose, all cameras aimed at him. Dozens of eyes, recording, unblinking. He froze. Cole cursed under his breath, retreating toward his truck. The other gang members scrambled, dragging themselves away before more lenses caught their faces. Elijah exhaled, his rifle lowering. For years he had carried silence like a shield, but tonight, the silence shattered. He stepped forward, voice loud, raw. "For too long, we've lived under their boots. For too long, I kept my head down while they burned crosses in fields and called it justice. No more. My son bled because I stayed quiet. Never again." The crowd erupted, voices rising, hands clapping, shouts of agreement swelling like a tide. Isaiah stood beside his father, chest heaving, pride shining through his bruises. For the first time, he didn't feel like prey. Marcus placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. His words were softer now, but still resolute. "You see it. They were never as strong as they made you believe. Power built on fear crumbles the moment people stop bowing." Elijah nodded slowly, his throat tight, and tonight, it crumbled. By morning, word had spread beyond the county. Videos of the clash lit up social media. Headlines called it a Marine Defense family from racist mob. Photos of Cole Matthews and his men, bloodied and armed, were plastered on screens. Reporters swarmed the sheriff's office, demanding answers. The mayor's phone lines jammed with calls. Sheriff Dwyer tried to spin the story, but the footage betrayed him, his smirk in the headlights, his silence as violence unfolded, his hand twitching toward his gun under the glare of cameras. Within days, an inquiry was launched. His badge, once untouchable, now weighed like an anchor around his neck. Back at the farm, Elijah worked the fields at sunrise. The land felt different still, scarred, but alive. Neighbors stopped by, some with tools, others with casseroles, all with words of solidarity. The same people who once kept their distance now leaned in, emboldened. Isaiah trailed his father, soaking in every moment. He no longer looked over his shoulder with fear, but forward with fire. And Marcus, standing at the fence line, watched it all with the calm of a soldier who knew the hardest battle had been won, not with fists or rifles, but with truth. Yet he also knew the war was not over. Men like Cole didn't disappear overnight, and the system that fed them still lingered, but the illusion had been broken, and once broken, it could never be rebuilt. The courthouse was packed, air thick with whispers. For years, hearings in this town had been a charade, verdicts decided before the gavel struck. But today was different. Reporters lined the benches, cameras poised. Folks who never dared raise their heads now sat tall, eyes fixed on the front. Cole Matthews stood at the defendant's table, his swagger gone. His lips still bore the scar Marcus had given him, a reminder of the night his grip on fear had cracked. The other gang members shifted nervously, avoiding the cameras. Sheriff Dwyer sat one row behind, jaw locked, face pale. His badge gleamed on his chest, but it no longer carried weight. Elijah Turner entered with Isaiah by his side, Marcus trailing behind. The room quieted as they walked, every step measured, heavy with history. For decades, black families in this county had been dragged into this building in chains. Today, they walked in, standing straight, shoulders squared. Isaiah's eyes darted across the room, wide, nervous. Marcus leaned down, whispering just loud enough. "Remember, nephew, fear is how they win." And today, they already lost. The prosecutor called the case, voice sharp. The People versus Cole Matthews and Associates. Testimony began. Witness after witness stepped forward. Neighbors, who had hidden behind curtains for years, now spoke with trembling voices, their fear breaking. They came in trucks, bats and knives in hand. I saw Sheriff Dwyer sitting back while it happened. My children watched through the window. They saw everything. The journalist scribbled, cameras flashed. Every word piled weight onto the scales. Cole's lawyer tried to spin it. These men were defending themselves from a violent veteran. But Marcus rose in the witness stand, gaze like iron, his voice cut clean through the courtroom. I fought wars overseas. I know what self-defense looks like. 12 men attacking a boy on his father's land in the dead of night isn't defense, it's cowardice. The jury leaned forward, hanging on his words. When Elijah took the stand, the room went silent. He had never been a man of speeches, but tonight his voice carried the weight of generations. I kept my head down for too long. I thought silence kept us safe. But silence let them sharpen their knives. My boy bled because I bowed. That ends here. I won't bow again. Isaiah sat in the front row, tears brimming, chest swelling with pride. The defense crumbled. Videos of the night rolled on a projectiles, men wielding bats, Marcus dismantling them with precision, Dwyer watching without lifting a finger. Gasps rippled through the court. Sheriff Dwyer shifted in his seat, sweat on his brow. His badge gleamed no brighter than tin now. Finally, the judge's gavel fell. Guilty on all counts. Cheers erupted. The gang slumped, chains clinking, as deputies hauled them away. Cole thrashed, shouting curses that fell flat in the air. His reign had ended, not with fire, but with exposure. But the real moment came when the gavel struck again. The judge's voice echoed, "Sheriff Dwyer is hereby removed from office pending criminal investigation." The crowd roared, cameras flashing, Dwyer's face drained of color. He tried to stand, but the deputies were already at his side, stripping the badge from his chest. For the first time in decades, his power was gone, the illusion shattered. Outside the courthouse steps flooded with people. Some wept openly, others raised fists, voices loud. Reporters swarmed Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah. One shouted, "What does this verdict mean to you?" Marcus's voice was calm, unwavering. "It means truth doesn't die just because men in power bury it. It means fear has an expiration date." Elijah placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "It means my boy can grow up free." Isaiah looked up at his father and uncle. His bruises faded, but his fire brighter than ever. He spoke quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough to carry. "It means they don't own us anymore." Days later, the farm was alive with movement. Neighbors brought wood, nails, food. Fences were rebuilt, barns patched, animals returned. What had once been a solitary struggle became a shared cause. Isaiah ran the fields again, not hiding, but laughing. Marcus leaned against the fence, watching him with rare softness in his eyes. Elijah stood beside him, hands calloused, face lined, but his spirit lighter than it had ever been. "You leaving again?" Elijah asked. Marcus shook his head. "Not yet. The boy's gotta learn more than how to fight. He's gotta learn how to live without fear." Elijah nodded, gaze fixed on Isaiah. "And he will." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting gold across the fields, the land felt reclaimed, not just soil and timber, but dignity. The Turners had endured abuse, betrayal, silence. But tonight, justice had come, not swift, not clean, but poetic. The men who had hunted them now wore chains. The sheriff who shielded them was stripped of power. And the farm, once a battlefield, was now a monument to resilience. Marcus's voice cut the silence, low but resolute. "Wars don't end with victories. They end when the oppressor has nothing left to take." Elijah breathed deep, the air sharp with freedom. "Then maybe this war's finally ending." Isaiah sprinted toward them, laughter carrying through the fields. His voice was strong, unbroken. "Uncle, Dad, come on." The two men exchanged a glance. Years of pain, years of survival, finally giving way to hope, and together, they stepped forward.